Hello everyone, we're going to get started today. Can you hear me okay? A few of you just type yes in the chat box below, let me know. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar, which is an introduction to inquiry-based science education and responsible research and innovation. Just to introduce your presenting team today, my name is Lauren Bohatka. I'm a project officer at the UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe, based in Venice, Italy. I will be introducing and concluding today's webinar, and I am pleased to be joined by my fellow presenters. First, we have Mr. Marcus Pedast, who is the project coordinator of the Ark of Inquiry project and professor of educational technology at the Institute of Education in the University of Tartu, Estonia. We also have Mr. Milis Bricker, who is also from the University of Tartu, Estonia, and is a specialist in the Ark of Inquiry project. Milis will take us through the online inquiry activity and the Ark of Inquiry portal. And lastly, we are also joined by our UNESCO interns, Ms. Samira Sial and Ms. Melissa Pirard. Many of you have already been in contact with them or will soon be in contact with them, and they've been interning here at UNESCO with the Ark of Inquiry project this summer and fall. And I will say without their support, the technical side of this webinar would not have been possible. So thank you very much, Samira and Melissa, for all your help making sure that today is a great success. So big thank you to everyone, and we will get started. So just a few points for some webinar etiquette if you've not done a webinar before. We do kindly ask that everyone keeps their microphones muted for the duration of the webinar so we can hear everyone clearly. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to write them in the chat box in this big space below, where many of you are already writing just right now, and we will discuss them at the end of each segment where we have saved some time specifically for this. That being said, this webinar is designed to be interactive. So doing this foreseen question and answer time, you can ask for voice privileges by raising your hand. There's a screenshot here in the slide of the little smiley face that's in the lower right-hand corner of your window. If you hover your mouse over that and right-click on it, you can raise your hand if you would like, and we will call on you when we have a chance during the interactive session of the webinar. In addition, there will be a series of polls to help with this interaction and feed us some information that we can help better tailor our presentation today. So just to get a hang of it, we have a poll for you now. So I will kindly ask Samira to bring up our first poll of the day. Come up in just a second. There it is. So our first poll for you. This is multiple choice. You can select as many as you like. What do you think are some of the biggest strengths or opportunities for teachers in your country? We have a variety of countries represented today. We'll get to that later. But just to give us an idea of what you think is going well, we're trying to put a positive spin on this. So please go ahead and click through those that you feel are the biggest opportunities in your country. You can also select the last option, none of the above, if that's how you feel. So opportunities for growth. You have regular teacher trainings, continuous professional development, collaboration between teachers and teacher networks, autonomy within the classroom, collaboration with other stakeholders, curriculum that is easy to follow and apply in the classroom, and a supportive culture in the school. Which those things you think you are well for you, please do select. We'll give you just a few more minutes for everyone to click. And then after you click the option in the middle of your screen, you should see a green button that says Send Votes. So be sure to click that Send Vote button, because after we close the poll, you will no longer be able to send votes. So we'll give you just another minute. Okay. Has everybody had a chance to answer the poll? Yeah, some of you are typing yes, answered. Fantastic. Okay. Samira, why don't you go ahead and close that out and we'll take a look at the results. Okay, fantastic. So 82% of you were able to complete that, so we thank you very much for that. So you can just take a quick look and you can see how it broke down for everyone, how you felt what's going well. We do see that the highest ones seem to be that the curriculum is easy to follow and apply, and also regular teacher trainings, which is fantastic to hear. We would love to see if we can find a way to have the Ark of Inquiry project feed into some of those teacher trainings and professional development. And for some of the lacking areas about collaboration between teacher and teacher networks, well, we're hoping we can help provide you with a teacher network that might be of interest to you to reach out to other teachers through our various social media platforms. And while I do, some of you also have said none of the above, and that's okay too. So hopefully you will find something in the Ark of Inquiry project that you learned today that will be useful for you and help you on your journey in the classroom and in education in general. Fantastic. Samira, take us back to the presentation, please. Okay. So just a short mention of today's agenda. Following up, you've already received the agenda in an email, confirmation email you've already received, but just as a quick reference, we'll start with this welcome and then a short introduction to the webinar, its presenters and purpose, and an introduction to the Ark of Inquiry project. Then Marcus will share with us the theory behind the project's inquiry model, which is the model we've been using in the project, and we think will be very interesting for you. Milas will then take you through an example for using this inquiry model in the classroom through a live online inquiry activity on Ohm's law. He will then show you briefly the Ark of Inquiry portal, which most of you hopefully have already signed up for. If not, no problem. You can easily do so after this webinar. And then lastly, I'll bring us back for just a quick recap of the webinar and some recommendations, suggestions, and where to go next. So the objectives of today's webinar, as already stated, the primary purpose of this webinar was to try to expand the scope of this Ark of Inquiry project outside its initial 12 countries that it's been working in to teachers and other participants, primarily from the countries of Southeastern Europe, which we had identified, which are not currently part of our project. But we do have expanded this since then, as well to include teachers from other parts of the world, because we do feel it has a more global application. It's nothing that is limited only to Europe. So we are very pleased to have everybody join us here today. So we're excited to have you with us. The webinar was served to introduce the project's inquiry model and how it can be applied to suit the classroom's individualized context. We will also introduce the portal, which offers inquiry activities that are ready to use in the classroom on a variety of STEM subjects and activities. And additionally, based on feedback from this webinar that you will give us at the end, we hope that there may be a possibility of identifying future opportunities for the project, perhaps in your part of the world too. So we're going to hope to find some new opportunities together. And who is this webinar for? Well, the primary audience today are teachers of science at both the primary and secondary level. You are the ones for which the trainings and the resources of this project have been primarily designed for, but it's also useful for educational authorities and policymakers, teacher educators and researchers, scientists or staff in science centers and museums, and also just pupils themselves and their parents, as many of the activities of the project, particularly those that you will find in the online portal, could be done at home with the support of parents, siblings, tutors. So there's really something in this project for everyone. So just to show you a little bit about who you are today, here are just a few figures and facts about those of you who have signed up for today's webinar. Now, of course, not everybody is able to actually join us during the webinar today, but here's a bit of a picture for you. We do have a number of participants signed up for it today from Albania and India, so we welcome people from those countries. And we also do have a wonderful representation of people from a lot of other places around the world too. So a lot of people from different countries here in Europe, so we welcome you, but also some more to the east. We have our friends from Russia and Turkey and Ukraine. To the north and to the south as well. So everybody, welcome on board. We do want to say a big thank you to the help from the UNESCO Associated School Network project, coordinated by Ms. Sabine Detzel at UNESCO headquarters, as we initially had started our contact with many of you through the local ASP.NET coordinator in your country. So we do thank everybody involved with that program for spreading the word and getting you on board today. In the next slide, I will show you also, we asked you a couple questions in the registration form about who you are and your familiarity with some concepts. So just also to show you what you have responded, the large majority of you, 3/4, are indeed teachers, so welcome teachers. We hope you'll find this very interesting. We also do have a number of teacher educators with us. Also, we have some principals and administrators in the school and a variety of other fields as well that you've identified with. So some of you maybe have identified more than one category, and that is perfectly fine too. And we welcome all of you on board today. And then did ask, as I mentioned, how familiar you were before this webinar about the two concepts of inquiry-based science education and responsible research and innovation. So here are the results of what everyone has suggested. This is based on the 116 registered participants for today's meeting. So you can see that when it comes to RRI, responsible research and innovation, only about 10–13% of you really feel confident and familiar with this topic, and about twice as many feel more confident with inquiry-based science education in general. And as you'll see in today's presentation, these are two concepts that are that work really well together. They are different, yet have a lot of similarities. And hopefully this will be a chance for those of you who maybe have heard of some of these concepts, are somewhat familiar, as many of you have indicated, give you a bit more background in it, and maybe see that you see for the first time you know, how to actually use and apply these ideas inside the classroom with your teachers, or if you're in a different role with your teachers, if you're a principal or a teacher educator as well. So just to explain just a very little bit about the project itself, and its applicability. So we are a teacher training project, as we said, on inquiry-based science education and responsive research and innovation, ongoing over a 4-year time frame, starting in March 2014. So we will officially conclude in February 2018, but our work will not, and neither will our activities and opportunities that this project affords you, so please do stay tuned. It is coordinated by our friends who are with us today at the University of Tartu, Estonia, and has partners in 12 different countries that are highlighted here on the map. So we have a variety of inputs and experiences from east to west, north to south across Europe, which has fed a lot into this project, and we're very grateful for it. And throughout the various activities and efforts, we do hope to, by the end of this project, have engaged over 1,100 teachers, and through them over 23,000 pupils from ages 7 to 18 in this project activities. And we are definitely on our way to meeting those goals. We're very thrilled to report. And we're also engaging science and teacher education students, such as pre-service teachers, and researchers and scientists and staff from various research institutions, science centers, and museums. So we have a wide variety of stakeholders involved in the project. A little bit of background about the project. Nearly a decade ago, the European Commission did a study on science education in Europe, which noted that there was a problem regarding a low interest by young people in studying math and science. And this is something, while this is a report for the European context, it is around the world also something that we are looking at, we being the project team, and also here at UNESCO. And one of the origins of this situation was found, among other causes, to be in the way that science itself is taught. So one of the solutions was to try to use more inquiry-based practices in order to help with pupil motivation and create a deeper science understanding. Based on these ideas, the project Ark of Inquiry was developed with two overarching objectives. One, building a scientifically literate and responsible society through inquiry-based science education, and raising youth awareness to this concept of responsible research and innovation. And together, these goals work together to create what we are calling a new science classroom, where there's a stimulated interest in the STEM subjects, STEM, of course, being science, technology, engineering, mathematics, an increased participation in and out of science classrooms, engagement with the students for their critical reasoning skills, and to provide a more higher order and more authentic learning opportunities and structure to the lessons that teachers are providing. So what have we actually been doing all this time, since we've been ongoing already for 3 years? We've been conducting a series of face-to-face teacher trainings in a 3-phased approach, treating teachers first as learners themselves, then as thinkers, and finally as reflective practitioners. We've been doing that in each of the 12 countries of the project. We're also visiting schools to support teachers in their IBSE journey. We've been collaborating with many of these same teachers to develop various pedagogical scenarios, which you see they're listed on the right-hand side of your screen, which are also available for you as participants on our Ark of Inquiry portal. Very useful. We've created this repository in the portal of over 500 different inquiry activities that are ready to use for you as teachers to take and immediately apply into your classroom. And also developing different evaluation instruments and tools, and an award system that will help stimulate interest and motivate pupils in the sciences. Also, these are ready to go for you. And throughout the entire process, we've been engaging the broader, in the sense, Ark of Inquiry community through dissemination activities. So what is this, very briefly, what is inquiry-based science education for those of you who have not yet had the opportunity to really get to know it? Briefly, inquiry learning in itself is defined in the Ark of Inquiry project as an approach to learning that involves the process of exploring the natural or material world and that leads to asking questions, making discoveries, and rigorously testing those discoveries in the search for new understanding. More specifically, inquiry learning can be seen as a process of discovering new relations with an approach where the learner himself or herself, formulates hypotheses and then tests those hypotheses by conducting experiments and or making observations. And on the other side, we have the responsible research and innovation concept. Responsible research and innovation, or RRI, as we lovingly refer to it, can be defined as societal actors working together during the whole research and innovation process in order to better align both the process and its outcomes with the values, needs, and expectations of European society, which is in our context at least. And there's currently a very strong political motivation to foster RRI in Europe, which is indicated by the incorporation of this concept into the EU research funding program Horizon 2020, who many of you may be familiar with. So as defined within the Horizon 2020 program, the concept of RRI can cover a variety of issues related to research and innovation, and these are issues that are now directly addressed and tackled by the EC itself. We refer to these issues as policy agendas, and the 6 most prominent being those of governance, education, ethics, open access, gender, and engagement. But beyond this political motivation, RRI is also identified as a complement of inquiry learning that is able to enrich the overall inquiry experience. So the Ark of Inquiry project has been addressing these RRI-related issues in 3 ways, primarily through collaboration amongst peers, communication of the results of an inquiry activity and throughout the process, and then also just in general broader reflections throughout the inquiry learning process concerning the inquiry process itself and its different constitutive elements, the identification of explicit as well as implicit moral issues related to a particular scientific inquiry, and the recognition of the social context in inquiry learning. So just with that, for that brief introduction of the concepts and everything, I believe we have our colleague Margus Pedast is online with us. Margus, are you ready to take over the discussion of the Ark of Inquiry model?
Yes, thank you. I hope you hear me well. So my name is Margus Pedaste, yes, that's correct, and I'm happy to talk you something about our Ark of Inquiry model. And this model was actually developed already before the start of the Ark of Inquiry project in another project, which is called GoLab, which developed online laboratories for science learning. And you might also look at what is developed in this project if you search in Google for GoLab. But just to tell you some words about this this project, we not this project, but the background information behind of that is that we were looking for an inquiry cycle that could really work in different projects and also in the Ark of Inquiry context. And you have probably heard something about inquiry learning, and we were looking what is the common information about inquiry cycle. And therefore, we made a large-scale literature review. So we wanted to ensure that inquiry learning really aspires to engage students in an authentic scientific inquiry process. But from the pedagogical perspective, we saw that the inquiry process might be a bit too complex. And therefore, it is important to divide the inquiry into smaller, logically connected units that could be called inquiry phases. And those inquiry phases could be, again, later to be connected to an inquiry cycle. So that we will start from the phases and later we will come back to the inquiry cycle. So if we are talking about the work we did, then you can always look on this in more detail in our paper published, so that you can look about this in a journal of research, educational research review, where this is one of the most downloaded publications for last 2 years. And this paper, that is open access paper, was focusing on 2 main research questions. As I already told you in the context of the previous slide, the first question was that what are the phases, and the second question, how the phases should be arranged in an inquiry cycle. In the end of the presentation, that's correct, you can also see the link to the article. But now I will first show you the model that was developed, the framework that was developed in this literature review. In this literature review, we found actually that there are more than 100 different terms used to describe the inquiry phases. But of course, there were overlappings between those phases. If we go into the content of the phases, and then we decided that we have to merge the complexity by merging the terms. And we found that actually those more than 100 terms can be sequenced in a way so that many of these terms are actually overlapping with each other. And so we ended up in a sequence of different phases where we had around 30 different phases in inquiry learning. But it was still far too much. And therefore, we discussed with our colleagues in the international community, and we ended up with about 11 different phases, and finally we ended up in 5 general inquiry phases. So those phases are orientation phase, conceptualization phase, investigation phase, conclusion phase, and discussion phase. And this figure here shows how those phases are linked with each other. In the next slides, we will go more in depth to different phases. But here it is important to see that first 4 of those phases, orientation, conceptualization, investigation, and conclusion, are following to each other. So that you have to first go through orientation, and after that you can go to conceptualization phase, where there are sub-phases of questioning and hypothesis generation. And after that you can go to investigation, where there is possible to go to exploration if you had a question formulated in the conceptualization phase. And you also had the possibility to go to the investigation subphase, experimentation subphase, when you formulated an hypothesis in the conceptualization phase. But in both cases, in exploration and experimentation, you will collect some data that can be interpreted in the investigation phase. Those are the 3 subphases in the investigation phase. And after that, you will go to the conclusion phase, where you might make some conclusions based on the data you collected in the investigation phase. What is important here is that you see many arrows, and not all the arrows are directed from one phase to another one, but some of the arrows will also bring you back. For example, you see that from the investigation phase, you can move back to conceptualization phase. It means that if you see in the data interpretation that something is not as you expected in the data, then maybe you have to revise your question or set a new hypothesis. You can go back to that. Or in the conclusion phase, it might be that you will find that you need to interpret your data differently. You can have that kind of small loop back that you will interpret the data you had. But you can also go back from the conclusions to questioning, to ask additional questions, to revise your initial question, in order to come back to exploration or experimentation, and finally to conclusion making. But in addition to those four general phases that follow to each other, there is a discussion phase. Discussion phase that is in parallel with all the other phases, so that we expect that communication and reflection is linked to all the phases we have, so that already in the orientation phase, you should define a problem of your study, but you have to communicate it to the others in order to get some feedback if this problem is well defined, or if it is interesting for the others as well, not only for you. And if you have done your orientation phase related activities, then you can also reflect on that. In reflection, again, you can go in depth, but you can do it based on the work you have done. So all these phases are linked with each other, and it is important to see that discussion could be in the end or in parallel with all the phases, but it also could be about the whole inquiry process, so that it could be also in the end of the other phases in a way. So when you look each of those particular phases more closely, then in the orientation phase, we can say that it is the process of stimulating curiosity about a topic and addressing a learning challenge through a problem statement. So two main topics here. So that one is we have to engage the learners into the process, so that we have to show them something that is really interesting for them. So that often we will present a video about the problem there, or we just tell an interesting story about the problem, or we just ask the students to discover something in real life to find the problem, and all of this leads actually to the problem. So that the second important topic in the orientation phase is that the outcome of the phase should be problem statement, so that you should formulate a problem that will be solved using the next phases of the inquiry process. The second phase is conceptualization. This is the phase where we now define the problem more clearly, in more details. And usually there are two activities that are related to conceptualization, and these are questioning and hypothesis generation. In both of those, it is important to rely on something. You can rely first on your pre-knowledge. Students can rely on their own pre-knowledge, but it is also important that in case of hypothesis generation, you will bring in some references to previous work, so that you will make a quest based on something. A quest, very shortly, hypothesis is an answer to a question, but we do not know exactly if the answer is correct or not, and for that we will design the study later. But it is an answer. Question is a question, hypothesis is an answer to this question. And it would be very good if it is based on a theory, so that please ask the students to read some background material. It might be something that you have searched, so that you can provide some material for them, but it is an additional skill to be developed in case of students, to help them to learn how to find useful information from the internet or books. So next comes the investigation phase, where, as you saw from the model, in case of questions, you can go to exploration. In case of you have an hypothesis already, you can design an experiment and use the experimentation subphase. So in general, the investigation phase is a process of planning, exploration, and later starting this exploration or experimentation. then collecting data, analyzing this data, and interpreting this data. So exploration is a systematic and data collection, but experimentation is more like a process of testing a hypothesis. So that in the case of exploration, you only have the question, you do not have a good idea about the possible answer, but in case of experimentation and hypothesis, you already have this. In data interpretation, you try to understand what your data is showing to you regarding exploration or experimentation, so that you will try to analyze this data, to make some new understanding based on this data, to synthesize this information. The fourth phase in inquiry cycle is conclusion, which is the process of drawing conclusions from the data. In this case, it is important to mention to the students and to check if they follow this recommendation and this rule, actually, that the conclusion should be really made based on the data they collected. It is quite often that the students want to take into account their own pre-knowledge and they do not update their knowledge and understanding about phenomena based on the data they collected. So that we have to ask them to check if their conclusions are really made based on the data or not. And in addition, it is important here in this conclusion phase to check if the conclusions are in accordance with the hypothesis or the research questions that were formulated in the phase of conceptualization. So that we have to check if we found the answer to what we were looking for. And if it is not the case, then, as you remember this big picture of the inquiry cycle, we have to go back to the conceptualization phase to revise our questions, or we have to go back to the investigation phase to revise the research plan we had, the plan for collecting data and to collect additional data if needed. And then in the discussion phase, our aim is to present our findings to other students and teachers as well, so that we see that one of the let's say the most recent changes in inquiry process has been to involve the students more and more to communication and reflection in conclusion, in discussion. So that this is an important aspect in implementing the main principles of responsible research and innovation as well. Because in case of responsible research and innovation, we really have to discuss with other people our ideas, and we have to collect feedback to these from others, so that in the context of inquiry learning, we also have to stress a lot of importance on discussion. So try to involve the students in communication and later in reflection. Communication is a process of presenting outcomes of a particular inquiry phase or the whole inquiry cycle to the others in all different formats, so that you can present in orally or in written format. You can also have some models, some figures about what you have done, or schemas. But it's important to keep in mind that the communication is not only in one direction, but you also should help the students to get better collaborators in a way, so that they help each other in a very positive manner, so that they can also listen and they can also give feedback to the others in a way that is really supportive, not that kind that gives some judgments about the quality of the work of peer students and the others don't want to improve their work based on this feedback. And reflection is a process where we often define 4 sub-processes, so that we first ask the students to describe their experience. This is, in general, reflection is a process of learning from experience, so that we ask you to describe the experience they had. Then by critiquing, we ask them to explain why they did something, and finally, after that, we ask also to evaluate them, how well they performed in this particular case. And finally, in addition to this describing, critiquing, evaluating, discussion phase is also here, where we ask the students to think on the strengths of their own, so that they can rely next time in the similar situations on their strengths, and they can also look from literature if there is something that they could do differently same time in the next in the same situation in the next case. And now I think that it's time to involve you a bit more into the discussion. So I ask now to open the poll, because I have one question to you, and the question is which one of the inquiry phases looks for you the most challenging one in case of students. So please think on the orientation, conceptualization, investigation, conclusion, and discussion. And please mark 1, which is the most challenging for the students according to your understanding. Okei. Okay. So I see that the answers are already coming. That's wonderful. Let's wait some more time. Some more, maybe a minute would be enough. Okay, I think that there is now already enough answers. So thank you all for participation. And as you see, for you, the orientation, conclusion, and discussion seem to be very, very, very easy ones, the easiest phases. I might agree with you, but still I would like to address, especially in case of discussions. I think that the most difficult part there is to keep the structure of the discussion and to involve all the students into the discussion, so that according to your understanding, according to your feedback, it's the most easiest one, but still try to be very structured in order to benefit more from the discussion. On the other hand, I'm very much agreeing with you that the conceptualization is quite difficult, because that's true. It's not so easy to formulate a research question, but it's even more difficult to formulate a hypothesis. And we have done some studies in Estonia, and we can confirm from that the formulation of research questions and hypotheses has been very difficult often, but not the most difficult one. And I agree with you that investigation might be very difficult one. Usually in international studies, it hasn't been considered very difficult and definitely not the most difficult as you consider it according to this poll. But what is difficult there, and what we have seen has been for the Estonian students in our cross-sectional studies, actually, the most difficult part from the investigation is planning the investigation. So that planning the data collection, planning the experiment, planning exploration, this has been. So that I really encourage you to put a lot of attention on the quality of planning in investigation phase. So, thank you. I hope it was useful. In any case, you are welcome to contact me in case of some additional questions. And I would now give the floor to Meelis, my good colleague.
Hello from me as well. We have already talked about the project itself and the inquiry model it is based on. But now let's talk about the activities we have collected into this project to showcase this inquiry model and to help us approach the thematics of responsible research and innovation. I have a little picture here that represents how we approached the project. There have been several projects throughout the ages that deal with inquiry learning, but usually they are not viable after the end of the project. So all those materials might become lost to teachers, or maybe even they might even be unable to use afterwards. But we have tried to sort of prolong other projects' lifespans as well by collecting their activities to our platform as well. So all these little colorful dots here represent different projects, and we have highlighted one project here with a logo as well, because very many of our activities come from the CoLab project, and it's one of the projects that is still not ongoing, but it has a follow-up project, so those activities are being used and developed further. But it's a very nice thing to use as an example today, because in addition to being an inquiry-based sort of a learning environment, it's also a very good collection of different aspects of inquiry learning itself as well, because it uses different virtual labs, different remote labs, and different data sets. These are three very important resources for us. With virtual labs, we have access to some experiments that might otherwise be too small, dangerous, expensive. So it sort of brings them into the classroom without us having to worry about those aspects. And in the case of remote labs, we have access to different facilities that physically exist in many science centers and universities all around Europe. And we can sort of conduct our experiments in them without physically being there. So we can manipulate the equipment through internet and have a real, actual experiment done with actual equipment. So it helps us to showcase what's really going on in science as well, sort of bringing the real world closer to students, the real science. And with datasets, it's self-explanatory. We can use different datasets already collected to sort of back our inquiry activities up. So it's a very nice project, and that's why we chose for today an activity from there. Additional reason being that it's an online activity. We do already also have a lot of activities that are doable physically in the classroom without the help of computer, but it's very good for webinars. So let's get to the activity. The activity is called Electricity, an Alternative Approach to Ohm's Law. And you can all already go to the link as well. The link is here on the presentation. And I'm going to copy it here into the chat as well. Might be easier to approach from there. And let's go to the activity, shall we? You can sort of see what's going on there. But the first screen that should appear for you is a big blue screen, which asks for your name. You can type any sort of nickname or any name you want in there. It doesn't matter at the point. You can just access it that way. But once you have entered, you will see the same inquiry cycle basically. The whole activity has been based on the inquiry model, so it will have different tabs for different phases. And we can sort of start with introduction and then see phase by phase how this activity works. And then later I will share my screen and we will play around with the actual activity as well. So in the introduction, we will see basically what the learning goals are. I'm not going to focus on this too much. And we can also see how this sort of a structure is introduced and how you can introduce it to students as well. But the interesting part comes in the orientation phase, because it opens the subject to pupils in many different ways. It uses text and video examples to sort of engage the pupils and start returning this topic. And as we move on to the conceptualization phase, we already have some ideas about the topic, and we can try out what knowledge we have as well, and sort of form a concept map using a concept map tool available in this activity. And as you can see at the moment, I only have one concept there, but it's a tool that allows them to make their own concept maps, sort of add additional blocks here with different concepts they already know or concepts they learned during the orientation phase, and see what sort of connections do they have. And based on that, they are supposed to form their own hypothesis for the following experiment and investigation phase. But in this case, this activity offers many different ways for differentiating the sort of difficulty level of the task, because it has been shown that forming hypothesis is quite a difficult task for pupils. So with this tool, we can help them in a way. The teacher can regulate how difficult or how much help a pupil should get in this process, depending on how the teacher knows what the pupils in his or her classroom are capable of. For example, in this version of the activity, we have very many sort of words already given, so the pupil can just think about those words and phrases and drag them to form a solid hypothesis. He or she can add his own ideas by using this gray box here, but he's not forced to. He can just build upon existing words and blocks. But the amount of words can be lowered, and it can be also non-existing. So we don't have to give too much information. They can do it on their own as well. And what's another very important is also the confidence of pupils. Are they confident in their ability to form hypotheses? Are they confident in a specific hypothesis? So this allows us to sort of direct pupils to think about that aspect, the aspect of confidence as well. As you can see, in this tool, we have this sort of a speed gauge, or sort of a little screen for doing something as well. And that something is sort of making a check on how confident you are about this hypothesis. And all this information here that the pupil inserts will be later available to him or her in the part where the results have sort of been discussed already, so he can form his or her own final conclusion. So it becomes very important later in the conclusion phase and in discussion phases. So let's move on ourselves as well. So let's move on to the investigation. Like Margus mentioned as well, usually the hardest part of investigation is actually planning the investigation. Here as well, there are some different guidance materials or texts that help the pupil out in this context. But the main aspect of the investigation phase in this activity is actually the virtual lab itself that they can use to make their experiment happen. So they have this sort of a planning tool, and it's also a place where to collect the data. But the work itself will be done in this virtual lab, where they can in this case, in this topic, make their own electric circuit and test out different aspects of that. For example, how does the voltage change when you hook different items to the electric circuit. So, but there's basically option to do all sorts of experiments because there are many different tools. Physics teachers will know it better, what we can do exactly with it. My vocabulary in English about physics is very, very low because I'm a biology and geography teacher myself. But it seems to be a very, very, very open-ended laboratory for testing other things as well, not only the ones that have been described in the activity. Okay, moving on. In the conclusion phase. Now, this is the place now where we move back and see the initial hypothesis once more, and we can form our final conclusion after discussing it with others, of course. What we actually think happened. Did we prove our hypothesis? Did we sort of rebuke our hypothesis? And also that is the place where a valid conclusion is that we need to experiment more and to learn more, because sometimes when we look back and see that a hypothesis that we were very confident in has become sort of not that good anymore, so the pupil can learn from that as well, how the confidence has changed after experimentation and how sometimes more investigation is needed. And it's very good to emphasize that that's okay as well. Result of having no solid result is also a good result because there's room for improvement. Okay, but let's move on with the activity as well. As you can see, there's also a tab for discussion phase, which is sort of a notoriously difficult phase to digitalize, but we're dealing with a digital activity. So the authors have tried to find a way for this activity to be used in a digital environment as well, provided that the pupils cannot communicate to each other freely. There's an option for sort of trying to imitate that in a digital form as well. So we can have pupils upload their conclusions and sort of chat about it here as well. But it won't, of course, be as good as a good classroom discussion, but it's best to combine this sort of independent work in the computer and group work as well, even with digital activities. Okay, that's a very, very thorough overview of the activity, and I'm going to share my screen in a moment as well. Let's look at this activity in real life as well. Okay, just one moment. Okay, sorry, it's still loading, but it will get there in a moment, I hope. Okay, it seems that I'm unable to share my screen at the moment, but that's okay. You all had the opportunity to check out the activity for yourself. And now let's talk about the potential questions you might have had during this sort of venture into the activity. So feel free to point out any questions you might have, and I'll try to answer them as well. Oh, okay. I think it's almost working. Nope. Okay, so the floor is open for different questions. feel free to indicate in the text box if you have a question you want to ask. Well, if not, then we had a question bread as well. Samira, can you help us with the question? Okay, let's move that question to the end as well and start viewing the platform instead. Okay, maybe we'll have some questions later. That's okay as well. We have another block prepared for you as well. So let's talk about the Ark of Inquiry portal now and all its different activities. We just sort of run through one activity, but there's plenty of others there as well. You can always visit the Ark of Inquiry portal, and many of you already have registered to the portal as well. But the address arkportal.eu is always available to you. You can just see what's available there. The platform consists of 4 main important parts, and we can just go through them together as well. And then I can try again to share my screen. Might work, might not, we'll see. The first important, and that's a very important part of the platform, is the Teacher's Toolbox section. In this section, we have gathered not only all the pedagogical instruments that help us to teach inquiry-based activities, but also to evaluate the inquiry skills of pupils. So I really recommend to see what types of materials we have there, but this evaluation of inquiry skills is a very, very interesting topic. And in addition to supporting inquiry-based science education, this is also designed to also support the concept of responsible research and innovation in the classroom as well, because different pedagogical scenarios offer sort of an introduction to the topic and from different views as well. We have materials about modifying activities to suit the needs of different pupils. We have paragraphs about languages, how to modify activities from other languages into your own language, how to translate them. Do you need to translate them? Because in case of most inquiry activities, actually, the verbal component of laboratories or actual activities is quite small, and it's very easy to sort of leave it untranslated and work with what's general in all languages, because the scientific symbols and principles stay the same in all languages. It's actually very good to read through these pedagogical instruments, pedagogical scenarios, and see how to modify activities with really a possibly small effort, because the less time it takes for us, the better it is in the classroom. So, and in addition to all these pedagogical instruments of evaluation and formative assessment and pedagogical instruments, there's also always the opportunity to share your own instruments as well, because we have envisioned this project to be about sharing best practices as well, sort of put emphasis on the community as well, because we have so many excellent teachers in Europe, and this is one way we can support each other. So we can add our own sort of tips and tricks for assessing pupils and their inquiry activities, or even using responsible research and innovation in the classroom here. So that's always an opportunity, and I invite you to contact your local coordinator, or in case your country hasn't been assigned a local coordinator, it's always good to contact me or Lorraine instead. So behind this link here, you can see the list of local coordinators that are already in place, and there's also our contacts in that list as well. So feel free to contact us if you want to share something, or if you want to ask more information about this topic. But let's move on. The next very important part of the platform, this is actually the most important part for a teacher who's already very confident in his or her pedagogical framework, or his or her skills in that area. So that's the repository of all these different inquiry activities. And like Laura mentioned, we have over 500, but at the time I wrote this presentation, it was 565. Now it's already a few activities more, and they're available in many different languages. Mostly it's the 12 project languages, but there are some exceptions to that as well. And we're always open to adding new languages. So if we have teachers who want to add their own activities to the platform, we're open to that as well. So you can just contact me or Lorraine once more. And since it's very, very important to find the activities you need very quickly and very, very, very sort of easily, it's very good to look at this this section of the portal and find out how the search function works. How can we use it to find the correct activities? Well, there are many different ways for it. For example, there is a very, very thorough search form you can use to find the activities that suit you best. And you can search through the platform and all the activities by using many different filters or sort of search functions. For example, if you look at the search form, you can perhaps navigate to the page yourself, because I'm unable to share my screen at the moment. I'm sorry about that. But you can just use a typical word search, which helps us to sort of find the right activity if we know the topic. But we can also search for activities using an age range. So if we want an activity for a very, very certain class or a very, very certain group of pupils, we can use this function. We can also search based on if the activity should be web-based or if we can actually go somewhere outside of the school as well, because we have collected some of these activities from science centers and museums in Europe as well. So there might be some activities that can be done outside the school in a specific location. In that case, we can search those as well if we want to sort of see what types of museums and science centers we have around our school and what activities they're offering. Also, a very important factor for searching activities is the language. In most cases, it's possible to modify the activity, but it's usually good to have a nice activity in your own language as well. And as you can see at the moment, we have many different languages already there, but it can always be better. So feel free to help us out in this regard as well. But if you can find activities in languages that you are fluent in or you can modify to use, then this is a very good place to use this knowledge. Okay, and then we go back to the inquiry cycle once more, and also the evaluation of inquiry skills, because this search function also allows us to search based on what skills or what competences in what phases we're trying to put the emphasis on. For example, if we have pupils in our classroom who are very good at investigation and planning investigations and forming conclusions based on investigations, but might be a bit lacking in skills related to communication and discussion, we can focus on that here as well. We can search for activities that are offering more support in the discussion phase, for example, and offering less support in the other phases. So we have a lot of different ways to combine these sort of proficiency levels of the activities and different proficiency levels of phases. So it can be very much tailored to the specific classroom or even individual pupils. And also, another very, very important search function here is the domain option. We can just choose a subject and see what they have here in regards to that subject. Okay, just two more. Another important search function here is the learning time, because teachers usually have a very, very limited time span they can use for the lessons. It's very good to have an activity that we can potentially do in the time we have planned to do that activity. So sort of like if we have 2 lessons to spare for an inquiry activity, we can search for an activity that lasts for that long. And if we have a longer time, we can search for longer activities, because sometimes it's very good to divide the phases between different lessons and days and sort of have a longer activity and be very thorough about different aspects of the inquiry. And another search function that we have, and this is the last one here, is the availability of a strong research, responsible research and innovation component. That means you can search out the activities that have a very good description of how to support this sort of concept, how to make pupils discuss about the topics of ethical considerations, environmental considerations, how science influences life. It's also very good in regards of inclusive learning, how to include everyone, and how to build a community around the school as well, how to engage different partners in this inquiry learning process. Can we sort of involve parents, science centers, and we have to make sure that everybody in the classroom is involved as well. So how to involve more, how to engage more girls and boys equally, not only boys or not only girls, how to make an activity interesting for everyone. So these activities that come out of this search function are the activities that offer support in this regard, how to use the responsible research and innovation component or some small parts of it. So it's very useful. Okay, so that's the inquiry activities repository, and the next block is community. We have a community page on the platform as well, and that enables us to create different sets for teaching our pupils, because it might be confusing if we added all our pupils in the platform into one big classroom. Maybe we need to give them different activities, but this enables us to sort of sort them out by their proficiencies or by their class numbers or by different subjects even, and sort of make sure they get the activities they need. So the teacher is able to recommend activities to different groups. So we can build a curricula of inquiry activities for a group specifically using the community page. So at the moment we have already 90 active groups in the platform. So some of the teachers have either tested or are using this community function to sort of manage their own classroom activities in there as well. And in addition to tailoring out the set of activities for a special group of pupils, it also enables us to sort of encourage discussion about activities as well, because all the groups they have a forum function as well. You can discuss topics on them. You don't just have to do the activities and see what you have to do, but you can also come there to discuss the activities with your group mates as well. So you can even ask questions once you have left school, once you're home, once you're doing something at home, when you're doing your homework, or maybe just doing an independent project even, maybe you're interested in something as a pupil, and then you can still ask advice from your teacher or from other pupils that might be dealing with similar inquiry activities. So we try to offer the option to offer as much support from peers and teachers as possible. And peer feedback is also integrated in a different way into the platform as well, because once pupils have joined the groups that teachers have been managing, they can also submit their findings to the portal to the teacher as well, and these findings can be assessed by the teacher, but not only by the teacher, but by the classmates as well. So all these different projects they might be doing can be evaluated by the peers as well. So everything is visible that the group does. There are no secrets in that regard. And okay, I see Samira has written something there, which sort of makes me point out for the third time that even though you might not be listed in the languages, or you might not be represented in the list of national coordinators, but you will still be supported even if you're not one of the countries that participated in the project in the beginning, you can still be a part, and in that case you can just contact either me or Lauren for more information about how to participate actively in the project. Okay, thank you, Samira, for pointing that out. And we were talking about peer feedback and teacher feedback, but there's another step that we took as well, since we wanted to make sure that not all the work or effort will fall upon the teacher. So we wanted the system to at least try to engage pupils and reward them for doing inquiry activities as well. So even if they are not receiving feedback, they will receive some sort of a reward or motivation for doing it. And this is very visible on the 4th page of the platform, which is basically called Inquiry Passport. It's actually on the platform, you can just see your username and click on that to get to that page. But it's basically a collection of your user data. It exists for teachers and pupils alike. It shows in which groups you are active in, which activities you have started, completed, or not yet completed. So it's a very good way to keep track of where you are at the moment, so you don't forget to actually finish the activity. Because that's also important, the platform measures time as well, from the beginning of the activity to the end of the activity as well, so the teacher can see how much time it took for the pupils as well. It can be a very good way to estimate the proficiency, inquiry proficiency of pupils as well, the time it takes them to finish an activity. Maybe they're having trouble in some place, and that helps us away, sort of a very simple learning analytics tool. But moving back to the awards, the system gives out its own awards based on what the pupil has done in the platform. For example, you get an award for being an active participant in inquiry activities. You get badges for completing different activities. For example, in this slide, we have 4 of these activities here as an example. There are actually over 30 of these. But for example, let's start with this one, with the paintbrush and the palette of colors. This is awarded for example, completing 3 activities from the domain of arts and crafts. So we are focusing on STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but we're still open to all our other activities as well. And that's why we have kept this option available as well. So teachers can submit their own activities, and they don't have to be from the STEM domain, because the inquiry cycle is actually applicable in all subjects. It's just a bit more difficult to find support in those subjects, but it's still possible. For me, it's also very good because art is a very good topic. I like to use it in my biology and geography lessons as well, to sort of integrate this into my lessons as well. And I think it's a very good idea to keep it open for these sort of collaboration projects as well. We don't have to limit it only to STEM. Okay, and for the other ones, this is for astrology and geology, for example. And this golden one here is for it's corresponding with the Hall of Fame concept. And this is a very special page on the platform. This is actually something that can be seen in the Inquiry Passport and on the community page as well, because pupils that have been awarded with medals, these sort of really big inquiry awards, are visible both on the community page, and they can see that award in their own Inquiry Passport page as well. So there's an opportunity to highlight pupils who have done really well in their inquiry activities. For more information about the award system, I invite you to look at the Teachers Toolbox page as well. There's a very, very good overview of the awarding system in our project, and also general ideas about how recognition and awarding can be done in inquiry learning, how to make the achievements stand out to pupils themselves and to others as well, to motivate pupils even more to engage with more inquiry activities. Okay. Yes, but now we really do have a poll question for you. So, Samira, can you help me now? Excellent. So, after all this talk about the Ark of Inquiry platform and the activities and different types of activities, how do you, as a teacher, see that you can use the Ark of Inquiry portal? Do you see it as a place where teachers can go to find inquiry activities, or do you see it as a place where pupils can work independently to work on their own assignments and seek out the topics that they're interested in? Or do you see it as a combination of different aspects to use it by teachers and pupils collaboratively to support and evaluate the inquiry proficiency and different skills? So let us know. Okay, I think we have at least some of the answers. Maybe we can see what those answers are. Okay, thank you for participating. So, in general, it seems that most of you feel that it's a very good place to develop the skills, inquiry skills of pupils, and work together, the teachers, the pupils, and maybe even some other societal actors. So, but I see that none of you have answered that it's a good place for independent work. So from that, I can conclude sort of that this sort of system might be maybe perhaps too complex for pupils to use alone. But can you share with me your opinions as well? Why didn't you choose this option? Why do you feel that this is not the correct one here? They're all correct, but I'm just wondering why this one got no representation. Maybe you have ideas about that. You can just share them with me. Just indicate in the text box if you have something to add. Okay, in that case, I'm just going to conclude with that actually this poll result is very representative of what we discovered during our pilot phase, the testing phase, and during our teacher training sessions as well, because it became apparent that even though the platform is a very good source for activities, it will be most useful if you're trying to sort of get the whole package to sort of support the inquiry journey, the development of inquiry skills. But of course, this might be time consuming. In that case, it's still a very good resource pool, a very good source of different inquiry activities. So yeah, thank you for that. Oh, let's see, there's something. Okay, the process is complex for the students in initial stages of understanding through inquiry. Yes, that's the idea. But that's something that we can try at least. We have tried in some cases, and I invite others to try as well, to start working in the platform together with pupils, and then try to slowly move towards independent learning as well. Because after the initial grasp, the pupils will learn more and more about the scientific process itself and the inquiry process. So they will be more and more competent, and they will be also probably more full of initiative to do things on their own as well, sort of to inquire about the topics that you might not be teaching or learning in the classroom. So it opens up for these sort of personal interests as well, and this should be supported as well. Okay, any other comments? If not, I think we can move on, and Lauren will have some things to discuss with you once more about our future steps and how the project will conclude. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Milas, and also Margus before you for sharing all this wonderful information about the theory and the model behind the Ark of Inquiry project, as well as with the sample activities, so we could see exactly how all those different phases come into play in just one of many activities that are available through the Ark of Inquiry portal, and the portal itself, of course, where you can find everything. So just to recap everything we've done today, we've done so much. As we said, we've gained an overview of the project objectives and its goals, and the role of this webinar in particular, not just SEE region, but also globally. We've covered the concepts of inquiry-based science education and responsible research and innovation, and how it is embedded within the project's 5-phase inquiry model. This demonstration of the inquiry model in the classroom through an activity in Ohm's law, and how to access, as Milas just went over, all the different inquiry activities, the pedagogical scenarios, the create communities, and use the award systems within the portal itself. But what does this all mean for you? How can this help you, which, as we said, the majority of you are the teachers? So as we did, hopefully you've now discovered that there are kind of 3 different ways that we think this could be of interest to you. The methods and opportunities offered by the Ark of Inquiry project can help meet the professional development needs of science educators through providing different resources and techniques. As we just said, all these different pedagogical scenarios, the inquiry activities themselves, the evaluation instruments, the award systems, all of these have been demonstrated to encourage and motivate participation in the STEM subjects in the classroom. Also through building supportive communities, through comprehensive training and collaboration, trying to engage teachers as learners, thinkers, and reflective practitioners. And then also through engaging and encouraging ethical and moral contributions from our future generations, the pupils, through the use of this responsible research and innovation, RRI. And we're doing this by fostering discussions, making authentic connections, and promoting also in addition, a gender balance in the classroom. And of course, from our side here at UNESCO, we're not engaging in the Ark of Inquiry project just in and of itself because we think it's a fantastic opportunity, although we do, but we also like the way that it fits inside the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which we hope many of you have had some exposure to, at least throughout your teaching and your exposure to the media as well. We try to make a big splash about this. But in terms of the big picture, how is the Ark of Inquiry and using such techniques and models helping towards achieving sustainable development in the world? Well, directly it can have an impact, as we see it, through goals 4 on quality education, 5 gender equality, and also 9 dealing with industry innovation and infrastructure. We see this through that the inquiry model and the pedagogical scenarios are allowing teachers to customize science lessons to ensure a better quality education for all to reach more students. By using relatable examples, collaboration, reflection, and dialogue, especially found in the orientation and discussion phases of the inquiry model, this also helps to enable equal participation of both boys and girls in science lessons. So this is also a very important output that we've discovered by doing what we've been doing. And through encouraging responsible research and innovation in science lessons, it can serve to help drive scientific research and innovation from a very early age, and therefore down the line influencing future economic development, employment, and social stability. And also there are a number of other sustainable development goals that are impacted indirectly through what we're doing, primarily through the usage of the inquiry activities themselves in the classroom. So if you're using activities that relate to clean water and sanitation, you're also encouraging information related to goal 6 on clean water and sanitation. The same thing goes for goals 7, 11, 13, 14, 15 relating to energy, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, and life below the water and life on land. So next steps, what can you do next? For yourselves, so the participants of today's webinar, we very much hope that if you haven't already, please do log into Ark of Inquiry portal. If you want to upgrade your status from that of a pupil, which is the default application, to that of teacher, please do contact Milas or myself. We do hope that you will search through the inquiry activities available. They are available in a variety of languages in the portal. And you can also add your own activities. Once you're upgraded to teacher, you can add those activities. If you have any questions, again, contact Milas or myself. We do look forward to adding activities in more languages, but we do need your help to do that. Also, the pedagogical scenarios are very useful in helping making your lesson plans more effective, whether you're trying to figure out how to adapt an existing activity to include more phases of the inquiry model, or if you're trying to figure out how to adapt it to different proficiency levels of different students within the same classroom. There's also one on RRI, and there's also one on gender, and a couple others, so we hope that those will be very useful for you. And lastly, we do have a reporting form. It is linked from the main Ark of Inquiry portal. We do hope that you will consider using it after you do an inquiry activity in your classroom, because it will help give us feedback as to, is this being useful for you as a teacher? Are we meeting our goals? Because if it's not useful for you, it's not useful for us. So please do give us your feedback when you actually use activities from the portal. On our side, we are going to continue supporting educators in applying the IBSE and RRI in the classroom. Will continue to engage participants through the project dissemination activities like project newsletters, which we hope that you will all soon be receiving. Our latest one will be coming out, I think, in the next few weeks. And also at our upcoming final conference to be held this November at UNESCO headquarters in Paris. And of course, we offer assistance in disseminating your inquiry activities by uploading to the portal and making them available to teachers around the globe. So if you have a great activity, again, we cannot stress this enough, this is a really nice opportunity for you to share what's been effective in your classroom with other teachers, because you never know who else will also find it useful, and students who will also respond to those activities in their classroom. For more information, you can contact us through the Ark of Inquiry website and the portal. The addresses are there again, and this information will be available, of course, after the conclusion of our webinar today. Please do follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. All of our content information is there, including also our other colleague, Leo Seaman, who was with us with the first webinar we did a few weeks ago. Some of you have asked about coordinators in other countries, such as Albania and for Croatia. If there is somebody who's interested in taking on this role, do let us know. We are interested in trying to find ways to make this process work for people in countries outside the 12 countries of the Ark of Inquiry original project. So we are interested in that because we do want this to be sustainable and useful for everybody who's interested in it. Again, as you mentioned, here are some of the references from some of the citations that we made throughout the project, throughout the presentation today. So it's there for use if you wish to find more information. They are open source. And then very lastly, just a big thank you to everyone. If you have any questions, you can please feel free to write them in the chat box for now, or else you can email us directly as well. So thank you very much for joining us. And that's it for today. So many thanks to you all.